And welcome to Tribe Talk, where we take sermon into a conversation. And today I've got two incredible guests. I can't wait to spend some time with them. David and Sheila Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today here on Tribe Talk. And I'm really excited because we had Dr. Robi in the house for 2 Sundays in a row. I'm telling you, I was taking notes after notes. My phone was just blowing up with the notes that I was taking. And so I can't wait to really dig in with y'all about Dr. Robi's messages for these past 2 Sundays. So his title for the past 2 Sundays, one was Managing the Meltdown, which I thought was great. And then the second one was Managing the Moral Meltdowns. And it was just the way Dr. Robi kind of explains things. He brings such a complex topic down into something that is easily digestible. And I love the way he does that. So I'm going to pull something that really kind of resonated with me. Was he talked about the environment inside you, because he was really playing off all the climate change, but he was talking about the climate inside you. And so one of the things he talked about was the storm you display externally is a product of internal pressure. And then he goes into, fear is the fuel for frustration. And when you can't control something, it's out of control, and that causes stress. But then he really digs into it. He talks about stress can be good or bad, depending on how you look at it. So I wanted to get your takeaway, David and Sheila, on kind of stress and the climate and the environment inside you. How do you guys handle stress? What's kind of your perspective on stress and using stress?
You want to? Okay. So, I'll go ahead and lead. I really like how he outlined and helped you understand that the way you view stress is ultimately is the determining factor on how it's going to affect you, right? The lens that you view that stress through is going to determine success or failure, whether you blow up or whether you're going to allow it to fuel you in the situation that you happen to be in. Because a lot of times I don't think we realize we have that level of control, right? I think in society today, what we see a lot of is just people responding and reacting to their environment rather than actually responding to their environment.
Yeah.
And when he shaped it the way that he did, it was really empowering. Just because I realized that we do have that level of control. It's not just something that's out there that's affecting me. I can receive it, I can process it, and I can allow it to fuel me rather than take me down.
Yeah. And David, I love how you really pointed out that a lot of people don't realize they have control, that they're living a default life. Pastor Keith would say they live a default life, but if you take stress by design, then you can truly process it well. And I love how you pointed that out. That was a great point. Sheila, there's stress day in, day out, but so what was your take on Dr. Robi's kind of perspective on using stress?
Yeah, so with what you're sharing, with what Dr. Robi said, and then just your little example right now, makes me think of back when I used to work in the restaurant industry. I worked in a concentrated area, which was the event space. And every day we had events. Sometimes there was 5 events going on at the same time, and everyone was different, and everyone needed everything right now. And I was the one hopping in between rooms, making sure that everything needed to be as is. Well, there was stress involved in that every single day, but like what David just pointed out about stress being able to be a good driver, if I didn't have that level of stress that I needed in any given day, I could have dropped the ball, I could have not cared as much, so many things could have gone wrong. But the stress actually was a good fuel for me to rise up to whatever I needed at that specific time for those events. Versus if I'm sitting at home with him and I'm looking around at a dirty house maybe, and I start stressing over that, well, if I'm just going to stress and complain, that's not going to be helpful, right? So what the element matters, the situation matters, and then how we let that stress factor drive us into action also matters.
Ooh, and that's so good. And I like how you talked about, you use that stress to fuel you. And I know Pastor Keith talks about there's that tension, using that tension to really grow yourself. And Sheila, you really point out how you let that stress fuel you to do something positive with, whether it's in, catering in the hotels or the event centers, or whether it's at home just looking at a dirty house. You can complain and nothing happens, or you can use that tension to do some great things. And fantastic points. I love that. The second thing on the second Sunday with Dr. Robi, he talked about, this is great, don't resist temptation.
But delay it.
Delay it, exactly.
Delay it. Yep.
And what he talked about, because he talked about most temptation lasts between 2 and 7 minutes. So Dr. Robi says, give it 15 minutes and see how you feel afterwards. And, past the 15 minutes, you reevaluate, are you still good? And so what was kind of your take on that temptation?
All right, I'm gonna field this one because he really spoke to me on this one, because he started talking about dessert, and I am a dessert person.
He was ready to go have dessert with him afterwards.
Yeah, but when he said when you delay it and you take that time and you double it, let's say you do it for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Because I am such a dessert person, we don't do a lot of desserts in our house for that delayed purpose. That's the whole reason why we do it. Mm-hmm. Because what I've realized, especially since we just celebrated a birthday together, having access to desserts and being able to walk from my office to the kitchen in a matter of minutes, it is, that temptation is definitely there. And if I can delay it, it actually does work, because I immediately went to that example, and it was funny that he hit desserts, because I'm like, man, he is so right. It is so spot on. Because the minute you say, oh, you can't have it, I don't want to get into the next topic, but identity, but when he started talking about, you can't have it, and that's all you want to do is actually have it, and putting yourself in direct opposition to your emotion, that whole thing just completely played out. And I'm like, man, that is so wonderful. And it made me think of an example that Sheila often does when we mentor and stuff. So I'm going to put your hand up. So if I do this, she automatically, I didn't have to say anything, she automatically started to resist.
Yes.
And when you say, I can't, you're automatically putting your mind in the position of to resist. There's that tension automatically. Whereas if you just delay it, you don't have that. You don't create that tension space.
Yeah, that was a great example. And I love also Dr. Robi talked about, what do you do in that waiting period? And he gave some examples of blessing other people, getting into the scripture, or worshiping, or what are you grateful for? So what are those things that you do? And David, I loved your examples of just, not even having that temptation in the house, but so what do you do in that, the temptation wait? What is some of your takeaways from that?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that one yet, but what I will say is that there was a specific example that I was going to point to from years ago. This was when we first started dating. I was seeing a personal trainer, but I was working with a personal trainer.
I'm like, do we need to talk?
Different kind of seat. Anyway, he had taught us in the class, as far as it relates to food and those temptations that we want to have, he would say, don't tell yourself you can't have those things. Ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly do I need to have it right now? And if it's a 7 or above, then maybe consider. But if it's just like a 4 or a 6 or something like that, maybe you can wait till the weekend. Maybe you can bank it for a day when you want to have that.
Well, that in and of itself is a technique on what you do in the waiting, is to evaluate the situation and determine.
That was a great point. And I love how both of you guys kind of really alluded into that my last question I had for you guys, because it really does connect so well, where Dr. Robi said, declare your identity. And he talked about this experiment that they did at University of Houston, and when they said that I cannot do this, that they told the participants, I cannot do this. And there was another set of participants says, I don't do this. This is my identity that I don't do this. And David, you talked about, when you tell somebody you can't do it, then they want to do it that much more. But if you're
Anybody who has kids understands that.
Exactly. But if you declare that identity that I don't do this, even though Dr. Robi says I do desserts, but I don't do the temptation. It's a game changer in that declaring the identity, because he talks about when you declare your identity, there's authority. So I'd love for both of you guys maybe just share a little bit on just declaring your identity.
Just in this moment as you were talking, what it made me think about is how Pastor Keith always talks about legacy, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we can't do that right now because we don't have funds, and we know he doesn't say things like that. But he'll say things along the lines of, crafts don't, as a craft, this is how we operate,
Yes.
right? So he declares the identity over the situation and declares the authority in that identity, and has equipped his family, and we're all the fruit of everything that they've done.
Yeah.
But being able to walk in that identity and walk in that authority is what it made me think of.
Yeah, and I love that, David. It's like, because Pastor Keith says this is what we do as a family.
Yep.
We can do all kinds of things, but this is what we do as a family, and I love that. Sheila, what was kind of your takeaway from that declaring identity?
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Right? So I could clearly see as he was giving that example where I have implemented that unknowingly in my own life, where there was the BC, before Christ, that version of me, and then the version that I am today, my true version, my true identity, who I'm supposed to be. When I think back to some of the choices I made early on in life, and then if you were to present me with some of those decisions today, it's not a question for me. I just know that is not me. I don't participate in those things. I don't think like that. I don't talk like that. Just, being the kind of person that would be quick to use my tongue in ways that probably weren't always the most helpful. Now, on this side of things, it's my identity is different from that version back then.
And that is so powerful when you declare your identity in Christ. That just gives you an incredible power that you don't have beforehand.
Absolutely.
And I love that you brought that up. David and Sheila, it's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. I love your insight. Your takeaways are so powerful. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on Tribe Talk. Make sure you follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Make sure you share this episode of Tribe Talk with your friends, family, colleagues, maybe even a coworker. And we will see you on the next episode of Tribe Talk. God bless.